Ladies and gentlemen, in the past few years, we have seen many trends that embrace consumerism and materialism, like new technology, online shopping, and billionaire worship. However, at the same time, we've also seen many trends that are encouraging us to live a more frugal lifestyle and spend less money. And so in this video, I want to talk about 10 of those trends that I think will pick up as we enter 2024. Trends that will encourage us to live a more frugal lifestyle even if we don't realize it. Now, the first trend is the increased demand for smaller housing. If you want to buy or live in a house right now, for the most part, all you're going to find are very large houses with more space than you can possibly use. I mean, after Australia, the US has the second largest house size in the world, with the average house being 1,900 square feet. It's actually very hard to find a small house nowadays. I mean, the only way you're going to find one is if it was built 100 years ago. And I think that people are starting to realize that having these big houses isn't that great of a thing, and there's becoming more of a demand for smaller housing because there are so many benefits to smaller houses, like lower utility cost, low maintenance, and less responsibility. There are so many benefits to having a smaller house, and I think that people are starting to realize it. And I think as we enter 2024, there's going to become this increased demand for smaller houses, and builders are going to start building houses smaller. Now, the next trend is the increase of insurance model businesses. When you think about an insurance company, what's their business model? How do they make money? Well, it's very simple. A huge population gets insurance and pays a small premium each month. And some people will use the insurance. Maybe a tree falls on their car or they get in a wreck, but most people will not use it. A lot of people pay into it, but only a few people actually end up using it, and so it's profitable. It's a good business model, and this insurance business model is becoming increasingly popular for companies outside of insurance. For example, let's look at Planet Fitness that charges its members $10 a month. Planet Fitness is able to keep its prices so low because it has the same model where they have a huge population of people become members because the price is so cheap, but only a few people actually end up going to the gym. So many people buy into it, but few people actually use it. And I think that as we enter 2024, we're going to see more companies outside of insurance use this insurance business model, where they get a large amount of people to buy into a service because it's cheap, but expect that few people are going to use it. And if you're frugal and actually use the service, this is an amazing deal. Now, the third trend is the expansion of the secondhand market. 10 or 15 years ago, if you wanted to buy something secondhand, the only place that you could really buy it was either a thrift store or at a garage sale. Then it became a little bit easier with eBay. But nowadays, the secondhand market has just exploded, and you can buy secondhand things on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, Nextdoor, Poshmark, and many other secondhand places. There are dozens of places where you can buy and sell secondhand things nowadays, and secondhand things are even becoming cool. And I think that as we enter 2024, we're going to continue seeing this growing trend of the secondhand market. Now, the fourth trend is the increase of DIY. Another positive thing that the internet has been doing is the increase of DIY, or do-it-yourself. And one thing that I am proud about as a YouTuber is I believe out of all the social media platforms, YouTube provides the most value. There's a lot of garbage on YouTube, but if you want to learn something, there is literally a video about everything on YouTube. For example, I can type in 2013 Kia Optima oil change, and there are dozens of videos of people explaining how to change the oil for my specific car. Somebody has literally made a video about everything, which allows people to do things themselves rather than hiring someone to do it. And people like to do this because they can save money by doing it themselves. And I think that as we enter 2024, we're going to continue seeing this DIY trend of people trying to learn how to do things themselves in order to save money. And the fifth trend is the increase of no-frill budget alternative options. When you fly on an airplane nowadays, you kind of have two options. You can either choose to fly on a nice airline with many perks at a convenient time and pay a higher price, or you can fly on a budget airline with no perks at an inconvenient time and pay a much lower price. I mean, if I bought a ticket next month from Denver to Atlanta, the nice airline route would cost $328, but the budget route would only cost $78. And if I chose that budget route, it would be a little bit more uncomfortable. I would have to fly at night and I would be kind of crammed in the airplane. However, I would save $250. And in my opinion, being uncomfortable for a few hours is worth saving $250. And I think that as we enter 2024, we will continue seeing these no-frill budgeting alternative options. We'll see companies offering services that aren't that great, but the prices will be substantially cheaper, which will make it worth it. Now, the next trend is more rack and shelf style stores. Whenever you go to the grocery store, there are really two extremes. The first extreme is Whole Foods, where on the outside there's a beautiful entrance, and when you enter, there's mood lighting, calm colors and art, and pretty signs. It's a very nice atmosphere, but that atmosphere comes with increased prices. Whole Foods is an expensive grocery store, but the other extreme is Costco, where it has a very basic entrance. The inside has warehouse lighting, pallets stacked up, and basic shelves of food. Costco has almost no focus on the aesthetics, and because of that, their prices are much cheaper. And I like to call this Costco look rack and shelf style stores. It's just a bunch of rack and shelves. There's no focus on the aesthetics, but people shop there because they value these cheap prices over the shopping experience. And I think in 2024, we're going to continue seeing this growing trend of these rack and shelf stores that don't have any focus on the aesthetics, but offer much cheaper prices. Now, the seventh trend is no-frill restaurant alternatives. Another industry that's also starting to work in extremes is the restaurant industry, because on one extreme, you have these beautiful, trendy restaurants that focus on their aesthetics with fire pits, mood lighting, and comfortable seating. And that atmosphere comes at a much higher price tag. However, the other extreme is food trucks that have no seating, no permanent location, and no amenities. They just sell food. There's no frills, and that comes at a much cheaper price tag. And I think that as we enter 2024, we're going to continue seeing more of these no-frill style restaurants that don't have a nice atmosphere, but offer food at a much lower price, and people are going to enjoy it because they just want the food and they do not care about the ambiance. Now, the eighth trend is small businesses offering incentives for cash spending. Most transactions nowadays are with a card. I mean, in 2023, only 9% of all consumer transactions were with cash, which comes with some cons, because when you buy something with cash, you get the product or service, and the company gets 100% of your money. Whereas when you use a card, you still get the product or service, but before the company gets your money, the credit card charges a 1 to 4% fee to complete the transaction. And this fee is called an interchange fee. And small businesses hate this because say you own a small business and you have $20,000 in sales a month. On top of your normal expenses, you now have this added interchange fee. And that's a big hit to a small business. And to avoid this, nowadays many small businesses are trying to incentivize their customers to make cash purchases. Like gas stations giving lower rates for cash purchases or charging more for credit card transactions. And I think that as we enter 2024, we're going to continue seeing this growing trend of small businesses trying to incentivize their customers to use cash to avoid this interchange fee. And if you carry some cash around with you, you can save money and help support small businesses. Now, the ninth trend is younger people living at home longer. I am 30 years old, and when I look back on my 20s, I think the best decision I made was living at home until I was 23 and graduated college. Because living at home during that time allowed me to avoid student loans, avoid consumer debt, and focus on my studies. And this benefited me so much for the rest of my 20s because after college, I was able to live abroad, have time to search for a high-paying job, and even take a chance to pursue a career in YouTube. Not having the burden of debt has given me the opportunity to live the life that I want to live, and it was simply because I made the decision to live at home a little bit longer than most people. However, unfortunately, most people follow a much different path, where they move out in their early 20s and get in a bunch of debt and then try to recover financially for the rest of their 20s. And I think that many people end up realizing that it wasn't worth it. And I hope that future generations learn from the mistakes of my generation and choose to live at home a little bit longer, at least until you have the qualifications you need, financial security, and a job you want. It sets you up for success for the rest of your life. You're always one step ahead of everybody else. And that's how most cultures work, because we all need support from our families and we shouldn't be ashamed of that. And I hope that in 2024, we see this growing trend of younger people living at home a little bit longer so they don't end up becoming slaves to debt. Now, the final trend is stealth wealth. Now, if you've been on the internet lately, you might have heard of this concept of stealth wealth, which is the act of being wealthy without showing it off. We often think that wealth is a very visible thing, of big houses, nice cars, and abundant possessions. But that just leads people to financial hardship. Real wealth is what you don't see. It's living in a modest house, driving a modest car, and having few possessions, and then using that extra money to invest and build your wealth. And I think that many people are moving away from this idea that a wealthy person is a very materialistic person, and instead viewing a wealthy person as someone that doesn't feel the need to convince them that they have money and feel comfortable with just living a modest lifestyle. And in 2024, I think we will continue seeing this concept of stealth wealth. And those are the 10 frugal living trends that will impact you in 2024. With that, muchas gracias. Que tengan un buen día. Nos vemos, chicos.